Good morning. We need to understand why linear equations, the equations of a line, if you would graph them, why they look the way they look. Because we should also be able, later or very soon already, we should be able to construct our own equations, our own linear equations, when we are looking at the line. Or when they give us two coordinates and they will ask us, what is the equation of the line going through those coordinates? Now that's nothing scary if we understand those equations, why they look the way they look. So we're going to talk now for a couple of minutes about the general equation of a line. Now I am first of all revising some knowledge already because I'm just taking a sheet here which I've used in one of my previous videos where we have a few lines. It's a bit messy now, but where we discovered actually that for y equals 2x plus 1, that the gradient of that line was the coefficient of x2. Because if I would go one step to the right, I'd go 2 steps up to be back on my line. So that was the gradient, or that is the gradient. And for this equation, or for this line, equation y equals minus 2x plus 1, we discover that the gradient is minus 2. So we found out that the coefficient of x is actually the gradient of that line. Y equals 1 over 3x plus 1, then the gradient is 1 over 3. And we found out that was true because it takes 3 steps to the right to go 1 up. So that means 1 step to the right, what gradient is, how many steps you go up. So that's a third up, 2 thirds up in 2 steps, 3 steps, 1 up. So the gradient is a third. Alright, so that's a slide of before. Now I've drawn 2 more lines over here. Let's have a look. Y equals 2x plus 1. Now, the coefficient of my x, 2, I've just said that is the gradient. Now, is that correct? Now, if I go 1 step to the right, then I'd have to go 2 steps up. And indeed, it is 2. So the gradient of my line is 2, which is the coefficient of x. And as you can see, my other line is a lot less steep compared to this one. So the gradient, although still positive because it's going up, but the gradient is going to be less. And indeed, if I go 1 step to the right, I go a fraction up. So let's go 2 steps to the right, then I go 1 up. So in 2 steps, 1 up, that means that in 1 step, you indeed go a half up. So that coefficient of x is your gradient. Alright, now, and I'll summarize that in the next slide, but I want to look at one more important number, which is that constant, the number there at the end. Over here it's a positive 1, and over there it is a negative 1. Now what does that tell about your line? Alright, so the coefficient tells me something about the steepness of the line, gives me the gradient, but what does that constant tell me? Now when x is 0, so if I would evaluate for when x is 0, y equals 2 times 0 plus 1 for this particular case. And then y is 2 times 0 is 0 plus 1 is 1. So when x is 0, y is 1. And indeed, when x is 0, y is 1. There it goes through the y-axis at point 0, 1. And for this equation, when x is 0, y is a half times 0 minus 1, that is 0 minus 1, is the answer. And as you can see, it goes through the y-axis at minus 1. Now what does that number there, that constant at the end, tell you? It tells you at which point the line crosses the y-axis. At which point does it intersect with the y-axis? For this line at 1, and as you can see, indeed, at point 1. And for this line at point minus 1. And as you can see, indeed, that is at point minus 1. We call that the y-intercept. And that is really important, because if we now go back to the general equation of a line, we usually talk about the gradient-intercept form, which is the form, and they use different symbols, but y equals mx plus c. That is the general equation, where And that is important because sometimes you won't see an M but an A or B or whatever. It doesn't matter. But as long as you understand that the coefficient, M in this case, of your x is the gradient of your line, the steepness of your line, and that constant there at the end, your number, is the y-intercept, where it intersects with the y-axis, intercept. Okay, that's why we call it the gradient intercept form. 1y equals mx plus c, where m is the gradient and c is the y-intercept. And if you understand the gradient intercept form, somebody can tell you or ask you to sketch, for instance, let me write down sketch y equals 2x plus 3 and y equals x plus 1. Sketch those two equations, those two linear lines. And how can I do that? Well, if I just quickly sketch my axis, y-axis and the x-axis and the origin. Now if I do the first one, my gradient is 2 gradient. And what is my y-intercept? Where does it go through the y-axis? At a positive 3, the y-intercept. So that could be, for instance, point 3, and then it is a positive gradient, so it goes up like this. And you could say, if you label it y equals 2x plus 3. And if I have to sketch this graph in the same set of axes, x plus 1, so the y-intercept for this one is at point 1, so that's going to be a little bit lower, let's say here. And the gradient of this line is the coefficient of x, which is 1. It's 1x. 1x plus 1, we don't write the 1 because we're a little bit lazy, but it's there, 1x. So that is anyway less than the 2. So this line should be a little bit less steep if I'm sketching. So y equals x plus 1. Because y equals x plus 1, that is the line that goes through point 0, 1, where the y-intercept is 1 with a gradient of 1. Alright, and y equals 2x plus 3 is steeper, the gradient is 2, it goes through point 3. So you can easily sketch those graphs now, knowing or understanding the gradient intercept form. Somebody asks you to describe what y equals minus 2x minus 7 looks like. Well, you can say, well, the line is going down, the gradient is minus 2, so the line is going down, and it cuts the y-axis, the y-intercept at minus 7. So if I really quickly had to sketch that, because then I'm finished talking, I can talk for hours about this. This is just absolutely fantastic. But anyway, the y-intercept minus 7, negative. The line goes down because the gradient is negative. Well, can we sketch it like that? Y equals minus 2x minus 7. The general equation of the line, gradient intercept form. Why do we call it the gradient intercept form? Because y equals mx plus c, where the m, the coefficient of your x, you can assign any letter there, doesn't matter, but that is the gradient, and that constant, that number 5 minus 3, 12 minus 2.5 or whatever is your y-intercept, where it cuts or intersects the y-axis. Fantastic. I'm excited. I hope you are too. See you later.